Hi, Starlo here. So far in this series we've looked at choosing and putting together your gear, we've learnt some basic but very effective knots and rigs, and we've had a look at baits and lures. Now it's time to focus on casting so that we can get our lines out there into the water and actually catch some fish. Casting with modern tackle is pretty easy, but like most things in life, you'll get better at it with practice. It's not a bad idea to hit the backyard or the local park and do some practice casting before you go fishing, or even between fishing trips. I'm using a special casting plug, which is actually a weight coated in plastic, but you could use a sinker or an old lure with no hooks on it. But one thing you need to be really careful of is to choose an area where there's absolutely no chance of hitting anybody or any property. You don't want to put one of these through a window. Take a target of some sort with you. A bucket or an old pot or a tin is ideal. Place this out on the grass at a comfortable casting distance. Start off with about 20 long paces or strides from where you're going to be standing. Now, to cast with your light to medium spinning outfit, hold the rod and reel like this, with the reel stem extending between whichever fingers feels most comfortable for you. Next, wind the weight up until it's hanging about 30 or 40 centimeters below the rod tip. Then open the reel's bail arm while you hold or trap the line to stop it spilling off the reel and the weight falling to the ground. There are two ways of doing this, and one's better than the other. I've got a bit of an admission to make here. I learnt the less effective way when I was a kid, and I've stuck with it ever since. That way is to pick the line up with your finger like this, then open the bail arm. It works fine, but it's not quite as good as the other way, which is to trap the line against the spool with your fingertip like this. That gives you more control and greater accuracy. But I'm going to stick to my wrong way. You use whichever one you're most comfortable with. Okay, point the rod at the target, then take it back over your shoulder smoothly and swing forward and release the line when the rod's at about 45 degrees above the horizontal. You might need to experiment a little bit with this to get it right. If you release it too early, your weight's going to shoot up in the air, and if you release too late in the stroke, it's going to fly down into the ground in front of you. Just get comfortable with it, and you'll soon find that it's sailing out there sweetly. One tip that I will give you is to always try and have your weight hanging roughly the same distance below the rod tip when you cast, and also try and go back through exactly the same casting stroke each time. Makes for much more accurate casting. Now, so far what I've been showing you is called single-handed casting, and it's great for light gear, light lures and sinkers, but if you want to throw something a little bit heavier, you might need to bring your other hand into play down here on the butt of the rod. Then you can use that hand to pull down as you push forward and over with your dominant hand on the rod. Suddenly you'll find you're getting a lot more distance. A lot of people actually prefer to cast that way nearly all the time. Find out what works best for you. So far we've concentrated entirely on our light to medium spin tackle. Other styles of reel, like the side cast and the bait caster that we looked at way back in part 1 of the series, require slightly different casting styles, and they can be a little bit trickier to master, but they're not really that hard. We'll come back and look at those in more detail at another time in another series, but if you're really keen, you'll find plenty of good video clips on the internet about how to cast these and other reels. For now, I just want to encourage you to get out there onto the grass or onto the water and practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the better you'll get at casting and the more fish you'll catch. Yes! We're coming to the end of our first series. We're going to get out on the water, cast our baits, and hopefully hook, play and land some fish, and then we're going to look at what to do with our catch, particularly how to treat it humanely, ethically and sustainably so that we can all fish for life. But before we do that, I just wanted to quickly explain to you what the drag is on your reel and how it works. The drag, or slipping clutch as it's also called on a spinning reel, is activated via this knob on the front. It's a mechanism that allows a hooked fish to pull line from the reel at a preset pressure. This helps prevent the line from breaking or the hook from pulling out or bending. You can adjust this drag quite easily, tightening it or loosening it using the knob on the front of the spool. You should set the drag every time you go fishing and check it from time to time while you're fishing. Set it tight enough so that it takes a little bit of effort to pull line off the spool, but not so tightly that the line starts to cut into your hands or feels like it's going to break. Okay, that feels about right, and I can always adjust it later out on the water if I think that it's either too loose or too tight. Now, another tool that's really handy to have when you're fishing is one of these. It's called a landing net, and it's used to lift the fish out of the water. It's particularly handy if you're in a boat or on a jetty or on a fairly steep bank a little bit high from the water. Now, the best way to use a landing net is to steer the fish towards the partially submerged net and swim it in, rather than swatting wildly at it and chasing it. Remember, we're not catching butterflies. If you're careful and calm, you can land some really large fish with a landing net, even things like this big Spanish mackerel. Wow, how good's that? Okay, we're ready to catch a fish now, even if it might not be quite as big as that lovely mackerel. The first thing to do is to get our baits out into the water using the casting techniques that we covered. After you've cast your bait out and reeled in a little to recover any slack, pick the line up with your finger ahead of the reel so that you can feel for bites. You might also see bites as movements in the line or twitches of the rod tip. When you feel a good strong bite, strike by lifting the rod tip and winding the reel. Once a fish is hooked, stay calm and try to keep a tight line and a bend in your rod all the time. Play or fight the fish smoothly. If the fish isn't too big, you should be able to lift it from the water and swing it in like this. Be careful of any spikes or teeth the fish might have. Use a wet towel to hold it if you're unsure. Remove the hook and quickly decide whether you plan to keep the fish or let it go. If you're going to release the fish, handle it as little as possible and get it back into the water quickly. Remember, fish can't breathe out of the water. Sometimes, especially if your hook's a little bit small or you're a bit slow to strike, a fish might swallow the baited hook too deeply for it to be easily removed without causing injury to the fish. If this happens and you want to let the fish go, use your scissors to cut the line as close to the fish's mouth as possible and then get it straight back into the water. It's got a much better chance of survival that way. Eventually you'll hook something bigger. When you do, try to stay calm and play the fish smoothly. It might even pull line against the drag. This one's almost big enough to call for the landing net, but it's well hooked and the angler's decided to lift it straight out using the rod and swing it in. It's a lovely yellowfin bream, but it always pays to carefully measure the catch first. Yep, it's almost 28 centimetres, well and truly legal in the waters where it was taken. Good job. Okay, so we've caught a legal fish that we want to keep and eat. What do we do with it now? The best idea is to kill it quickly and humanely. It's better for the fish and it'll taste nicer too. There are a couple of ways to do this, and the first one is to hit the fish firmly on the top of the head with a hard, heavy object like this rock. 2 hits should do it. The fish is dead. Another way is to use a method called ikijimi, which is a Japanese term, where you use a sharp spike like this modified screwdriver or a knife and push it straight into the brain of the fish and twist it. It kills it instantly. But you need to know exactly where to insert the spike, and that varies from one type of fish to another. Luckily, there are some good websites and apps that can help you learn these important things. If you're unsure about ikijimi, you're probably better off to kill the fish by hitting it on the head and then cut through this area under the gills with a sharp knife, being really careful not to cut yourself in the process. This will help drain the blood out of the fish's flesh, which improves its flavour as well. Once you've killed and bled the fish, you need to keep it as cool as possible. The very best way to do this is to place the dead fish in a slurry made with ice and salt water. For the best results, you'll need to clean or gut and gill your catch within an hour or two of landing it, and that's something we can look at in a future series. But if you're not comfortable with the whole process of killing, cleaning and keeping fish, you can always choose to let them go, and lots of people do that. If you stick to the law, that choice is really yours to make. Fishing is so much fun. I've been passionate and excited about it since I was a little kid myself, and that excitement and passion never fades. I hope you've really enjoyed this series and that it helps you to become a better angler. I might even run into you out on the water one day. Until then, this is Starlo wishing you tight lines.